Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about sitemaps and how to create them in your Ruby on Rails applications. If you're not familiar, a sitemap is going to be pretty much what it says on the tin. It's just going to be a page you can visit or a series of pages that you can visit that will give you links to all of the important pages on a web app. This then allows a search engine such as Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, etc. to index the website based on what the author considers relevant. Now, they may still find other links that aren't in your sitemap, but if they do find a sitemap, sometimes it can make things easier and a little bit more reliant when you go to update your Search Console stuff. That said, generally, I think the guidelines, it's probably even mentioned here in this WordStream article I'm looking at, is like over 500 pages is where you might need a sitemap, or if you have like internal links, or not internal links, if you have a lot of rich media, or if you're lacking internal links, that's what I meant to say. So what this effectively means is, let's say in the case of a 500 page site, you might have a lot of posts on your blog, right? Internal linking might mean that you have 500 pages on your blog, but each of those are independent posts and they don't link to each other. So you don't have like any reason to interlink between your own posts. In that case, you can run into issues where it gets kind of hard to traverse between the different articles you have. In the case of a lot of rich media, you can think of things like Unsplash or like Wallhaven, I think it was called. Those websites that serve images only, where Instagram, for example, but we can take a look at like Unsplash real quick, where it's just a lot of images. These can get really hard to have some sort of association between them so that you can link between the different images so a search engine can find them and index them. Another example might be if you have a website similar to mine, like with PathFindOut, which is just a link on my website. Now this is linked in the nav bar, and I do mention it on a page or two, but it's not like super heavily interlinked. So you might run into a situation where a search engine doesn't find this page, but you might want them to find it. In that case, you usually create something called a sitemap. And there's two different types. There is a HTML and a XML version. In this case, I'm going to deanin.com/sitemap_index.xml. This is my index of all of my various sitemaps for my my website, right? And you can see here the post or the page sitemap. The page sitemap is going to have PathFindOut linked in it. And this is where you can sort of see all of this data being created. This is being used with the Yoast SEO plugin in the WordPress that I run. But you get the idea. If you have one of these sitemaps and the search engine gets to this page, they can then click on this and go to all of the various posts and pages that are on your website. So that's what we're going to be covering today. It's a shorter tutorial, but I do need to cover why you use a sitemap, just because, you know, there's always going to be those questions. In order to test this, we're going to be using a friendly ID gem to create those friendly ID stubs, just so that you can see that this isn't impacted when you go to create a sitemap. And for that, we're going to be using the Sitemap Generator, which has a specific Rails section that you're going to want to go to, because it also works with just plain old Ruby. So to actually do this, we'll create a sitemap that looks like this when we're done. It's going to be very simple. All we have to do is, let's cd out of here, create a Rails new video, and then we'll cd into that video project. Okay, so now we have this. Let's go ahead and let's get this up and running real quick. So the actual setup for this is just going to involve creating a scaffold for our post. Let's do a Rails G scaffold post with a title and a body of type text. We can then go ahead and add a bundle add gem for the faker gem, which we're going to use for some test data, and the friendly ID gem, which is what we're going to be using for those stubs. Then we can go ahead and run a Rails G migration. We're going to do add slug to post, where the slug is of type unique. Go ahead and run that as well. We can then do a Rails, and I think the other one was, if I can find it here, the Rails generate friendly _ID. And at this point, we can come into our app, our models, our post.rb, and inside of our post.rb, we can go ahead and add 2 lines for friendly ID. One is going to extend it, and one is going to say use the title for our slugs. Now this isn't going to update when we edit a post, but that's fine. That's not the point of this tutorial. We've covered that before on the channel. And at this point we should be good to go. So let's come into our DB and our seeds real quick. Inside of our seeds file, because we have friendly ID and we have a faker gem, we're going to create 50 posts, give them a title with the faker gem and a body. The friendly ID slugs will be created just like that. Let's go ahead and let's do a Rails DB migrate command, and then we can do a Rails DB seed command to create all of these posts. We can then go ahead and do a Rails S real quick and come over to localhost port 3000/posts. And we can see all of these posts being loaded up here. So that's good. Let's now go ahead and let's stop our server. Now, of course, you do also want to do your friendly find by down here in your posts, but we're not going to cover that here. Just sort of an aside. Now we want to come over to the sitemap generator. For this, all we have to do is a bundle add sitemap_generator. This will run our generator for us, or it'll install it, and then we can do a require in our rake file. So to find the rake file, hit Control B to open up your side panel here. It's going to be down here at the bottom. This is your rake file. You can then go ahead and save this, and now you'll have these rake tasks set up for you. So now we can do a rake, and it's going to be the sitemap:install command to install our config. But it's already installed in this case, so we can come into config and sitemap.rb. Now in here, you can set up all of the different things that you want to be indexed or that you don't want to be indexed. In our case, we have our posts. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a sitemap using these. So we're going to do a post.find each. We'll do post, and then we'll say end. Then we'll come down here. Let me hit Control+ one more time just to make sure you can read this. So for each of these posts, we want to add that post. So we'll say post path, post, and then you can pass in your arguments, because remember, this add is effectively just a method that takes in many arguments. And you can see up here, the example is, wherever it was, it has this options right here, and that's effectively what we're adding here are our options. So for the last mod, which is when it was last modified, we can set this to post.updated@. We can set the priority, but I'm not going to set that yet. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and do a rake sitemap refresh. This will then create our sitemap for us. We can see sitemap stats 51 links with 1 sitemaps. And the reason why we have 51 is because we created that set of 50 sitemaps, and we also have our index, right? So to check this, we can come into our public folder, and we'll see this sitemap.xml.gz. But of course, we can't read a .gz file. So what we'll do is we'll come in here and we can actually, let me just clear this. We can type GUN, and you can see gunzip-k for public/sitemap.xml.gz. We can go ahead and run this. Now you'll see the sitemap.xml file get created for us, but it's only one line. In this case, you can come over to your extensions, look for XML format. I think it's called like XML format right here is what you want to install. Go ahead and install that. And then assuming you have Beautify, I think it should work. If you now come into that sitemap that you created and you come to the end, hit a space, hit Control S to save, it'll now format your sitemap for you. And you can see here, first of all, the example.com is coming from the default settings for your sitemap. So if you do want to specify what your actual okay, sorry, my recording just crashed. If you want to specify the default URL here for this example.com, you can come into your sitemap, and up here at the very first line, you can see your default host. You can change this to, let's say, I don't know, localhost port 3000, for example. We can go ahead and save this, come down here, run that sitemap refresh again. We then want to do our gunzip command again. We'll say yes. We can then come over here, hit space, hit Control S, and now we can see all of these are relevant to localhost, or it might be Deanin.com, for example. Now, in terms of the priority, we can come in here, we can say, all right, this is a higher priority page. So we want the priority to be, let's say 0.9, sure. For the change frequency, we'll set it to weekly, I guess. It really doesn't matter. I think these are already set to weekly, but it's not something that should change that much, so you probably don't want it to even be that high. But now we can go ahead and do a sitemap refresh, and then we can do a gun zip again. do a -K, type yes, come over here, press space, hit Control S, and now we should see 0.9 for all of these with a change frequency of weekly for all of our posts. So at this point, you effectively have your sitemap set up for you. Now there's plenty of other options in here for you to play around with, including some cron tab specific stuff, which does use the whenever gem, which I do believe we have covered on the channel before. So if that's something that you're interested in setting up, we should have the background task with the whenever gem, which allows you to schedule these to run, let's say, once a week. Or every day, to make sure your sitemap is updated so that when Google tries to crawl it, it gets updated as needed. That said, there is also an option in here to ping search engines as needed. This isn't really something that's worth testing in like localhost or whatever. But for your actual website, once you get it up there, you can see here it's already trying to ping, but this is of course trying to ping for a URL. Which isn't going to make much sense, right? Because it's trying to ping for localhost port 3000, which Google is going to be like, I don't know how to get there. But when this was set to example.com, it was pinging example.com, but that's just because it's an actual website as opposed to something meaningful. So it would be worth making sure that when you go to ping your actual URL that it works. And they do have commands in here where you can run those ping commands to tell Google, hey, I've just updated my sitemap, go crawl it or whatever. But yeah, this is pretty much all I wanted to cover here. There's plenty of other stuff that you can do in addition to pinging and setting your default and making it scheduled. But this should at least give you enough to get started if you already have a website that's up and running where you want to make sure that it does show up on Google and everywhere else in a timely manner and stays up to date. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.